Demetrius Krishna Johnson.
His middle name's what?
Krishna.
What?
Krishna.
Like the Hindu god?
Krishna. Khrisna.
What? Huh. I want to know more about that. That's ridiculous. I mean, not ridiculous in a bad way.
Unless that's a Wikipedia error.
But I did not know that. That makes that. Now I'm curious about his personal life, wondering what his upbringing was and everything. That's interesting.
Maybe.
You know what my middle name is?
Maybe that's the secret to his success.
You know what my middle name is? It's an initial K. I don't have a fucking middle name. Like my parents were like, well, no, there's too much work. We're put in a good day today. Fucking an initial K. I don't even have a middle name.
That's how much your parents cared about your name.
That's what I'm saying. Like people like, what's your middle name? K. Like K-A-Y? No, like fucking the initial, like the letter K. And then
this explains so much about you.
Yeah, right.
Welcome to the Outsiders Podcast with AJ Herrick and Andrew Pearson.
Welcome to the Outsiders Podcast, where we discuss MMA from the perspective of outsiders.
Yep.
I'm Andrew Pearson.
I'm AJ Herrick.
And you're listening to the Outsiders Podcast. Oh, wait, I already said that.
You already said that. That's all good. It's all good. We're new to this. We're figuring this shit out.
This is the inaugural episode of the Outsiders Podcast. We recorded an episode last week that was not up to par, so it didn't make it to the air. But we're back this week. We're going to actually get started. So I guess I should introduce myself, and then AJ, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself briefly. My introduction will be much longer because I'm more important.
Hey, man.
So I'm Andrew Pearson. I write the Midnight Mania series at MMAmania.com. So you maniacs might recognize my name. I bring you the weird and the wild from the world of MMA each and every weeknight. So this podcast should focus a little bit more on those aspects of MMA, just the weird and funny shit that happens on a daily basis in our sport. I'm going to let AJ give his own introduction, but first I want to say AJ is the best guitar player I've ever met in person.
Thank you, man.
But he can tell you more about his background.
Well, before I go into it, did you just call your followers maniacs?
Yeah, so MMA Mania. So I mean, the followers are
fellow maniacs, like Hulkamania, like
kind of like that.
Hulkamaniacs,
yeah, kind of like that.
Yeah, I'm a guitarist in Houston. I've been following boxing and mixed martial arts most of my life. Trained in boxing for a while. My father was deeply immersed in it from a very young age and kind of passed it down to me. Saw my very first MMA match when I was 13 or 14, and I was like, whoa, this is interesting. This is completely different from boxing. It's like these body slams. I saw Matt Hughes body slam, Carlos Newton, all this cool stuff.
Awesome
oh, my God, it was great. And I just fell in love with it after that. And then I got my ass kicked in a gym because I didn't know how to fight on the ground. So that was a different perspective for me as well.
Yeah, so you experienced what everyone experienced at the beginning of MMA.
No, you don't know any better. Like, you don't know that that's a part of fighting. You don't really think about it, because, I mean, we in all fairness, the mentality is, let him up, let him up, let him up. I mean, you've seen the street fights on YouTube. Let him up. Hey, let him up, let him up.
Oh, yeah. Everyone wants to see people throwing hands.
I mean, Keith Thurman had a thing. Do you ever see Keith Thurman's thing?
No,
he
I did
said
not.
boxing's a gentleman's sport because he's like, yeah, well, it takes a man to let another man stand up and keep teeing off on him. I'm like, yeah, but, that's still a sport, brother. But, yeah, I mean, that's the mentality. So when you go and you start grappling with somebody, strength doesn't matter necessarily if the other person is more skilled than you. You don't know how to pace yourself because you've never been in that situation, especially on your back.
So basically, you experienced UFC 1 for yourself. You had your own personal,
I had my own
Gracie,
personal
moment.
Yeah, pretty much. I was. What did Luke Rockhold call Michael Bisping his Anderson Silva? You ever seen that?
No, I did not.
Well, I felt like I was everybody's Patrick Cote and everybody else was Anderson Silva that day, but whatever. Yeah, that's a pretty.
That's a great line.
Yeah. So, anyways, I'm a guitarist in Houston. I've been playing for 20 years, but I love MMA as well. usually people don't understand how the two coincide, especially in my line of work. People don't really agree.
Yeah, one thing about AJ is he's always worried about breaking his hands.
Yeah.
So every time we discuss fighting, he's like, "Yeah, but I can't throw punches. I just grapple because I can't break my hands because that's my livelihood."
Pretty much.
So for me, I always had a fascination with MMA and with martial arts. Unlike AJ, my father did not want to let me compete or train. There was a bunch of I grew up in a very religious household, and for some reason he thought I had an anger problem. I don't agree. I don't think I have an anger problem. AJ has the anger problem.
I got the anger problem.
I'm a super calm guy. So as soon as I became an adult, I did my best to rectify the situation. I started training jiu-jitsu. Started following the UFC religiously. So I'm a more recent fan in terms of actually being able to follow the sport. And I have a couple years of jiu-jitsu training. I'm still a white belt. I have one stripe on my white belt. So
that's more than most people.
Yeah. Good point. I trained Muay Thai for a couple of years, and I had one MMA fight. It was a very memorable fight for me. And I had one Muay Thai fight about a year later. In between, I had a couple smokers, which are unscored fights. You just go to a gym, show up, and fight people. For some reason, they always match me up with people bigger than me, which is a wonderful experience. But yeah, that's our background.
Yeah.
It's a little bit about us. So, I mean, let's dive in. We just had a UFC 216 last weekend.
It's very, very, very entertaining.
Stuff happened.
Stuff did happen. That is correct. Well, I wasn't too excited about it at first, mainly because
one of those sleeper cards.
It's a sleeper card, but there's I sometimes I have my favorites and then I have my not so favorites. Tony Ferguson's cringeworthy moments kind of deter me from enjoying him as much, but he fights really well.
Tony Ferguson on the mic is not nearly as entertaining as Tony Ferguson in the cage.
Man, it's pretty rough, bro. And then like Kevin, well, you know what? Kevin Lee's pretty cringeworthy, but like lately, I've been laughing my ass off listening to some of his interviews.
Kevin Lee's pretty great.
He's getting
on the
better.
mic.
He's getting a lot better. Like he started trying to do that Conor McGregor stuff, like repeating things Conor McGregor would say. Like there's a YouTube video on Super Fights that you'd have to check out. But
my favorite thing about Kevin Lee is his outfits.
Exactly.
No shirt, leather jacket, camo overalls, but not worn as overalls.
You're right.
And let's not forget the bandana around the neck and sunglasses on his eyebrows.
Did you see the Karate Kid bandana he had when he's fighting Michael Chiesa?
Yeah. This has been a consistent look for him. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess if I was that shredded, I would want to show off my abs too. Look like someone from Street Fighter. He looks like a Build-A-Fighter who couldn't decide which outfit to go with, so he just went with all of them.
Right.
But yeah, so it was coming into it. It was an interesting fight. Of course, you had the possible greatest of all time, the GOAT, fighting in the co-main event. We'll talk about that in a little while. AJ and I have differing opinions on his status and history of the sport.
Yeah, but differing opinions is what makes the world go around, right? I guess.
No, that's gravity.
Oh, that's politics.
And inertia.
And inertia, that's right. Oh, yeah. What do differing opinions do?
Differing opinions, they create wars and anyway.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting event. You had two title fights. One of them, yet another interim title, because a certain Irishman hasn't defended his belt in over a year.
Yeah.
So this is long overdue. But yeah, so let's dive into the main event. Tony Ferguson, man. Tell me what you thought of Tony Ferguson before this, and tell me what you think of him now.
I've always thought Tony Ferguson was a great fighter. I always thought he was top of the heap, the best 155 contender. I think it's long overdue title shot, way long overdue.
Oh yeah, man, 10 wins in a row.
Yeah.
Lightweight's such a deep division, but I mean, it was him and Khabib really those were the guys at the top of the division, and then Khabib ate too much tiramisu, and Kevin Lee stepped up.
The legend of Khabib.
I love Khabib, man. I hope we still see that fight. And we let's talk about what this means going forward.
First my opinion on Tony Ferguson that night, man. He I had forgotten that he's been training with Eddie Bravo for his jiu-jitsu.
Showing off that rubber guard, right?
Bro, you watch him roll, and you're just like, you just realize that there's so many different levels to grappling. Like you don't.
I watched this fight without commentary. How hard was Joe Rogan jerking himself off during those moments?
You know what? I can't remember because I was too busy in the action. But Joe Rogan, DC, John Anik, I think they were all kind of. I can't do the 3-person commentary. They kind of just talk over each other, so I kind of mute the TV.
Yeah, 3-person commentary is interesting. There was a funny moment a little while back. Someone suggested to Michael Chiavello, the voice, that he get a third person, and the third person was Robin Black in the booth with him.
Yeah.
And Robin Black was very complimentary of Michael Chiavello.
Yeah.
And Michael Chiavello responded with, 2-person booth is fine. Thank you.
Dude, that's funny.
Which is a great response, not just because a 2-person booth is generally better than a 3-person booth, but also because it was, the third party involved.
Right.
So that was a great moment.
That's pretty funny. So I think it was beautiful. He went for the triangle before. I believe in the first round.
Triangle twice.
Yeah.
The first time Kevin Lee defended it really well. So you got to talk about the fact that Kevin Lee's weight cut and affected him. Thing about Tony Ferguson, he didn't win that first round.
No, he did not. And two, speaking of the weight cut issue, Kevin Lee's a big boy. Kevin Lee is not.
Props to Kevin Lee, by the way, for making it through a staph infection, which he hid from officials.
Yeah.
Which, well, that's I don't know how you can hide that massive
cover up, bro.
Growth on his chest, but he made it through a staph infection. He successfully made weight on a second attempt. Tony Ferguson gave him props afterwards for it. He's like, yeah, I always knew he was going to make the weight. We come from the same background. Didn't you say they wrestled at the same college?
Yeah, they're I'm pretty sure that that was one of the whole arguments. That was one of the whole arguments with that was one of the whole arguments with them. They were consistently going back at each other. Tony Ferguson say, "Yeah, you've been following me, going in my footsteps," all this other stuff, and they're just trash talking in that way. But Kevin Lee, that was if you watch the post-fight press conference, he was very emotional, obviously, through that. I mean, these guys 100% believe that they're going to win, and when they don't, man, it's devastating. It's kind of like a dream crash, and they got to kind of go back to the drawing board.
Ray Borg and Kevin Lee both cried after their fights, and you know what? I can't be mad at that. If you haven't stepped in the cage as a professional fighter, I don't want to hear anything you have to say about fighters getting emotional after a loss. I watched these fights, and even the short elbows Tony Ferguson was landing on Kevin Lee from his guard, I was like, you forget how tough these guys really are.
I mean, at that level, I don't think anybody in that, like a regular person, would even be able to take a punch from even the softest punching. I mean, even Elvis Sinisic, like who was arguably has one of the worst records in UFC history,
or even Jake Shields, notoriously not a hard puncher.
But I can't imagine getting wrapped up. But anyway, so Kevin Lee in the post-fight press conference.
Yeah, you'd like that, wouldn't you?
Hey, man. Actually, I would, man.
Grappling with Jake Shields?
Dude,
you like getting tapped like 6 times in 2 minutes?
Oh, my God. Just to like be like, whoa. Just to have that humbling experience. Like, man, I am not as tough as I think I am, Everybody has to have those moments every now and then,
Oh, yeah.
Jeez, there's just different levels. But anyway, so Kevin Lee in that post-fight press conference talked about his weight cut. And you remember at the weigh-ins, he was a pound over, had to run on the bike for about an hour, cut down to 145.5 or 154.5. And he talked about his weight cut, and he talked about it's time to do a 165-pound division and 175-pound division. He talked about that. Well, so here's the thing. I don't think that's ever going to happen because of the response from Dana White. Kevin Lee talked about that. He talked about, sitting on stage probably at 185. Like putting the water back in him. He's a big boy.
These guys routinely cut. Aljamain Sterling was saying these guys routinely sit about 2 weight classes above their division, and I think that's pretty consistent all the way up to middleweight. So I mean, for him, he's sitting there at 185. Some lightweights cut even more than that. Some lightweights are cutting down from 190 or 195.
Yeah.
So there's some fluctuation there, but it's extremely unhealthy.
Yeah.
In fact, if we get a death in this sport, I would say it's more likely to be from weight cutting.
Yeah. Well, that's the issue with boxing, the dehydration.
And when I say if we get a death in the sport, I mean at the highest. I mean in the UFC, there hasn't been a death that's high level yet.
Right. They had one FC, I believe it was like a couple years ago or a year ago.
Yeah, and then you had Dada 5000 almost dying in the cage, having to be resuscitated. But that's more on Bellator's freak show fights. But no, there has to be a solution to this weight cutting thing. The early weigh-ins have not worked; they've been a disaster.
Right.
There's got to be a solution, and you got to figure out a way to eliminate that culture of weight cutting. We could do same-day weigh-ins. You monitor hydration. It's going to be a really difficult problem to solve, but they've got to tackle it at some point. There have been recent studies that show fighters lose a lot of their athletic potential when they cut weight 24 hours before competition.
Yeah.
There's no way of getting around it.
Well, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but a perfect example of that would be Donald Cerrone. His transformation from 155 to 170 is
Look
crazy.
completely different. And some people say, again, this is kind of speculation, but some people say it's because he's no longer afraid of gassing out at 170.
Of course.
And then, he's also a faster guy. There's other factors there. But I know for a lot of fighters, gassing out is a huge fear, and for obvious reasons. Look at Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee was faster. He was beating Tony Ferguson, out wrestling him in the first round. And then, he gets tired, he starts slowing down, and, fatigue makes cowards of us all.
That's right.
Didn't necessarily make a coward of Kevin Lee, but it definitely made him less effective, and it left him vulnerable to a triangle that he easily escaped in the first round.
There's an issue with cardio, but there's also an issue with pace. Pacing yourself is very important. Obviously, I'm not trying to be an expert and tell Kevin Lee's game plan was wrong or anything like that, but when you cut that amount of weight, you're already kind of compromised in the cardio department. If there was a 165-pound division, I believe that would help a lot of fighters. The talent pool in 155 and the talent pool in 170.
Those are the two deepest divisions.
Exactly.
So if people talk about adding cruiserweight, and there's just not enough.
There's not enough
talented big guys in MMA.
Right.
I mean, it might be healthier, but look at women's featherweight. People are talking about we should add a women's featherweight division. There's basically no one in that division.
None. And they're
no
already
talented fighters. And just because women, you look at the bell curve for weight distributions in men and women, and very few women in general are that big compared to the overall population, and very few men. In general, like when I say very few, we see big guys in Texas all the time.
Yeah.
We're recording here in Akima, which is basically True Detective season 1 territory.
That's right, man.
The only season of True Detectives. But the point is, like, in comparison with the general population, they're relatively rare. That's why the bar for heavyweight is lower in MMA.
Right.
And we can talk about that in terms of flyweight as well. But lightweight and welterweight, that's where you have enough people to make a new division.
Exactly.
And I think they should, but you're right, probably won't happen.
So I'll tell you the reaction Dana White gave when they asked that question to him specifically. His answer was almost a like an advertisement for his UFC performance center, training center. He starts going,
goodness.
Kevin Lee should have cut weight the right way. We have free nutrition advice, free training, free monitorization, all this stuff. He could have came down to the performance center in Las Vegas, which he could have.
All these millions of dollars they spent building a performance center instead of paying them.
Yeah, and the only person that goes there is Francis Ngannou.
Yeah.
Like the only person that's ever there.
Yeah. Other people will visit, and it's like, I guess that's a nice showcase for the UFC, but why don't you
Francis
pay your fighters
Ngannou,
enough money?
Dana White even said, he's like, I feel like Francis Ngannou is like my roommate there living there. And I was like, yeah, because, it's the only guy that shows up there.
Not everyone can afford to go to the performance train. Just pay them enough to be able to afford proper training on their own.
Well, it's just kind of crazy. I just think that, dude, Kevin Lee's a professional fighter. He made the weight. And you're telling him he should go to your performance training center to cut weight probably the same way. What other advice are you going to tell somebody that's been
Who's
training,
fighting through a staph infection?
Who's fighting through a staph infection, but who's been fighting for a long time? That has been
he's
wrestled
never missed weight once.
Never missed weight. Has been wrestling at the top level during his college years, cross training during his college years. Just being a professional athlete, he's only 25 years old right now. I mean, he's only 25.
That's impressive, man.
Yeah.
I'm 26.
Yeah, I'm 20. Damn. You're only 26?
Yeah.
Damn, dude, I keep forgetting, like, we have that. When do you turn 27?
in December.
I'll be 28 the next month. Damn.
Yeah. So you
Who do you think's gonna die first? Me or you?
Probably you.
Why? Why do you say that, man? That's fucked up.
I don't know, man.
Jesus.
You're a much crazier driver than I am.
That's true. That's a good point. So yeah,
I've literally been in the car with you when you made turns. And you were on two wheels.
Everybody says that shit, dude. Everybody says that shit. Everybody says like I'm like a terrible driver. I'm like, dude, I'm never.
No, you're not a terrible driver.
I'm just wild.
You're just wild. You get emotional when and I'll be fair. I have deep existential anger at the Houston traffic as well.
Oh, dude.
But I would say I deal with it with
did I
rather
do the
less
other day?
rage than you do.
What did I do yesterday? It was somebody. I've just been calling people like flipping out and flipping them off, say "fuck you, man," and like obviously I don't know if they have a gun or not. Probably.
You're in
it's
Texas, man. Chances are a lot higher.
Yeah, but I need to chill out on that, bro. Yeah, you're right. But anyways, whatever. This isn't a fucking psychology podcast. Anyways, so we'll save that for your other podcast.
My other podcast. Yeah. So let's get back on track. So in terms of Tony Ferguson, man, how does he match up with the rest of this division? He's on what, a 10-fight win streak now? Mm-hmm. That's an insane record in the lightweight division.
Yes.
But he's got a lot of people he still hasn't fought yet. The matches that come to mind that get me amped are Khabib Nurmagomedov, Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Khabib.
My apologies to Nurmi. Nate Diaz, if he ever comes back. I doubt we see that fight, honestly.
Right.
But the other one that makes me most excited is Justin Gaethje.
So Justin Gaethje is a World Series of Fighting champion. He had an impressive debut.
His debut, honestly, I would call it the fight of the year. That shit was fucking wild.
He got rocked, and then he came back.
Rocked twice.
Yep.
Came back and just broke Michael Johnson.
So Justin Gaethje... I got a little bit of insight from another podcast. Not insights because it's a fucking podcast and everybody listens to it. But just to kind of go off of this, his mentality is like it should be in fighting. Not necessarily the best.
He has a really good mentality for fighting. He was talking to one of his. He's a really good coach too, by the way.
Right.
The thing that like people underestimate with Justin Gaethje, he's a brawler, but mentally he is right where he should be, man.
So his idea is he doesn't really give a shit if he has brain damage or not. His mentality is, I'm fighting. He's like, this is you. This is what it is. Like it's part of the game.
There's no way to avoid it.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's not. I mean, you're fighting. Like you're putting your health on the line in that way. So I guess his mentality is just whatever. Like I'm gonna be champion. I'm gonna be the best. I'm gonna that's his goal. And the only way you're gonna be able to do that is his style is just fucking come for. I mean, he can't see that well anyway. So how's he gonna slip punches?
His glasses are thicker than yours.
Right, yeah. So like how's he gonna fucking slip punches? Like, you know what I mean? Like
he does pretty well.
He does well,
pretty well.
But he's gonna eat a lot too. He's gonna eat a lot of shots.
Oh yeah. He accepts the risk that comes with his fighting style.
And that's the way you should think as a fighter.
Yeah. So I mean, like, how do you see him matching up with Tony Ferguson?
I think it go either way. If it's
that to me, that is my dream fight in this division. I'm looking forward to Gaethje Alvarez just because those are guys who both get hurt. Yeah. And they come back, and they've also fought in other organizations. Just they have a long history outside the UFC. Yeah. So they're the hipster. This is the hipster fight fans' dream fight. For me, it's Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje, because I've seen both those guys rocked. Neither of them even slows down when they get rocked, and they're just both violent as shit.
Right, and there's one thing that I could say about Tony Ferguson is he's very unorthodox in a lot of ways, but I believe he gets the job done. Now you mentioned Khabib. I'm not really on the Khabib train right now because we don't know when he's coming back.
That's true, man. He's just on some tour in Russia, and he gets money from not just from the UFC. He gets money from a lot of places, a lot of sponsors in Russia. He's involved with EFN, which is a Russian fighting league that he's a part of. So he's one of those names in Russia. He's got 1 million Instagram followers, man.
Yeah.
So Khabib is not. He's not in one of these positions where the UFC can just dictate terms.
Right.
I mean, I hope he comes back. There's something about a guy who grew up in the Caucasus Mountains wrestling bears that's just inherently really appealing.
Very, very much so.
And I think a lot of it comes down to a lot of these matchups come down to cardio. And that's why I'm interested in the Gaethje fight, because neither of those guys, even when they get tired, they just keep throwing. With Khabib, we've never seen him in a 5-round fight.
Right.
I think he murks Tony Ferguson early, just based on what we saw in the Kevin Lee fight. Those body lock takedowns, that's exactly what he does. If it stays at range too long, I don't think he wins. I think Tony Ferguson would kind of piece him up at range. But if he can dictate the terms, and if he can wrestle Tony Ferguson, I think he'll win. I think he'd probably win the better part of 3 rounds. The question is, over 5 rounds, is he eventually going to get tired?
Yeah.
And is that going to cost him? We saw Michael Johnson. The one thing about Khabib is that his entries are not always the greatest.
Right.
So when Michael Johnson had him stuck on the outside, he hit him with some good shots, rocked him a little bit, and Khabib just forced him into the fence with his just brute bear wrestling strength and tossed him like a sack of potatoes.
Yeah.
He could probably do that to Tony Ferguson, but if he doesn't finish him in 3 rounds, the last 2 rounds could get real interesting.
So, like I said, the Khabib thing, I'm just not on. I have a little bit more of a personal opinion about this, just because as a casual fan, what you would think. I'm not really a casual fan, but as a fan, what you wouldn't think that the way he kind of hasn't been as active lately. I mean, he's been injured. Okay, so we have the injury problem. We have the weight cutting issue recently.
The first time he's had trouble with that, to be fair.
First time,
but he does get injured a lot.
He does get injured, but
Trains
first time
AK,
he had,
no
but he was eating dessert. You know what I mean? Like he was doing stuff he knows better. He's a professional. You know, he should be acting as a professional.
Yeah.
So I don't want my champion to be Khabib. You know what I'm saying? Like this is what I'm saying. So I don't even think that him coming back, he should not even get a chance. I think he should have another tune-up fight before he even gets
Who should he fight?
Title.
Maybe like Edson Barbosa?
Maybe that's not even a good matchup because they're completely 2 opposing styles. Like
it
Edson,
is.
You know,
it is. But Edson Barbosa is a sleeper guy at 150. He's ranked number 4. He's won 3 fights straight over like 2 former champions. No one's even talking about Edson Barbosa.
I think if whoever wins Gaethje and Alvarez, I think Khabib could fight either one of those.
So a lot of this comes down to the man himself, the guy who's at the top of the food chain in MMA.
McGregor.
Yeah. Can you do the Ireland scream that he does? The eerie?
Hello! I keep thinking he can say hello.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
I
can only do brief Cork accents.
Just for reference, the reason I'm asking AJ is he did live in Ireland for about 8 months.
Something like that, yeah.
So be careful over there, man.
I know, dude. Practice my hammer fist on the table.
Yeah, so McGregor, who does he actually fight when he comes back? Dana White makes it seem like he's going to fight Tony Ferguson.
He said Tony Ferguson, but he's been saying Nate Diaz before this fucking fight. So who?
Yeah,
who knows?
so I mean, if McGregor hadn't taken the detour to fight Mayweather, make $100 million, which, again, you can't blame him for. He's the only MMA fighter who has ever done that. Probably the only one who ever will.
Right.
But if he hadn't, I would have said Nate Diaz 3 made a whole lot of sense. But now it really doesn't. How do you justify that? And I know McGregor's the guy who breaks all the rules, so he probably would just disregard this. But you've got an interim champion. You're the champion. You've got an interim champion. Has there ever been a case where the champion has not fought a healthy interim champion? Has that ever happened before? How can you possibly justify that? Would he have to fight Nate Diaz at 170 again? And like, how do you not strip him of his belt if that's the case?
He's the money fight. You can't strip him of the belt. He gets away with things that other fighters don't because he's the one that draws all the pay-per-views.
Absolutely.
He's the superstar. He's the only one. John Jones is no longer a candidate for superstar status. He fucked that up.
McGregor is literally the only one right now who can really move pay-per-view units. Exactly. So my question is this too, because Nate Wilcox, who's like the league manager for Bloody Elbow and MMA Mania and MMA Fighting, he said that the reason that they would consider Tony Ferguson is that Nate Diaz is actually asking for real money, and no one in MMA besides McGregor makes real money.
Right.
Nate Diaz has said before he wants $20 million. I don't know if he'll get that figure, but just throwing it out there is indicative of his mindset.
$20 million for a pay-per-view fight?
Right.
Dude, Conor's never made a $20 million for a pay-per-view fight in
No. And the thing about MMA is like what people don't understand is people in MMA are used to seeing such small paydays.
Right.
McGregor made $100 million fighting Mayweather, but he could just as easily make $30 million fighting, anybody.
Right.
He could fight Amir Khan and make $30 million easily. He could fight Paulie Malignaggi in boxing just because by being his own promoter, he makes the lion's share of the cut. Right now, the UFC takes more than 80% of the gross revenue.
Right.
In other sports, it's usually split 50-50.
Right.
MMA has no collective bargaining. So Nate Diaz is actually asking for real money because he knows what that is. Diaz brothers are eccentric, but they're not stupid. But my question was, is the difference between the payday that Nate Diaz wants and the payday that Tony Ferguson will settle for greater than the difference between the pay-per-view buys that fighting Nate Diaz would generate? Because, Tony Ferguson, the reason he's not good at talking trash is he doesn't like it. Nate Diaz, Nate Diaz grew up on the mean streets of Stockton. Mm-hmm. He's been talking trash since he was a kid. Yeah. And he hates fighting. So he just gets pissed off. And it's just much more authentic. Tony Ferguson, he's making it up, and that's why it's cringeworthy, because it's not him. You know what I mean? He doesn't like talking trash. He's a guy who actually has respect for these guys that he fights. Right. It's hard to fake being an enemy to someone when you're not really an enemy. Deep down, you have a lot of respect for them. So, but regardless, Nate Diaz sells more pay-per-views than Tony Ferguson. That's pretty much a given. So, is the difference in payday greater than the difference in like gross revenue the UFC will see? And do they care? Do they care more about like exerting control than making a million, few $1 million more or less?
So, I don't think it's up to the UFC. Conor will make that decision. I don't think they have a choice. Conor makes the decision who he fights. I think if he wants to make the more money, which he obviously is going to do that. I believe he fights Nate.
I bet he fights GSP if GSP beats Bisping.
You think so? That's not a bad.
He said that. He said as much in Scotland. He's like, yeah, GSP's an option, but he said he doesn't think he'll beat Bisping. But if he does, they'll fight for the middleweight championship, and it will be the most what's the word? Farcical for a complete farce. Yeah. It will be the middleweight division title picture has been just trash for a long time, right. And it's going to be even worse if GSP wins.
Dude, I'm not even worried about that fight, but I want Michael Bisping to win that. And we can't. No.
It's weird to be rooting for Michael Bisping when he hasn't defended his belt against a legitimate contender once.
I can't do the GSP shit anymore, man. That's over. Like I can't have.
I wonder how many MMA fans feel the same way.
A lot.
How many people do you think are going to buy UFC 217 since that is the next UFC event coming up?
I think there's going to be a lot, but I don't think it's going to.
You think it's going to be more than 500,000?
I don't know. Maybe, but
my over under would be probably 750 or 800,000.
You know what though? It's different. I mean, even though it's only been like 4 years that he hasn't fought. Times have changed, man. Like people forget.
But a lot of those people come back when they see a name that they recognize. That's why old fighters. That's why Bellator is exploiting like Kimbo when he was alive. Kimbo Slice, Ken Shamrock, Hoist Gracie. Come on, these are the originals. And there's a reason that they still draw because people recognize their names and they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna tune in to watch that. I remember these guys, even if they're like 86 and like they can barely move and have arthritis.
Right. Yeah. Back to the Conor fight. GSP that would be an interesting fight to watch. Unfortunately, I don't think it would be a very exciting fight because we already know what GSP is going to do, and we've already seen Conor McGregor at 45 get taken down by Chad Mendez pretty easily. So
yeah, I feel like my GSP would just take him down repeatedly.
He would have to.
Yeah, and so on that note, too, talking about matchups, we never got through talking about Tony Ferguson versus McGregor. How do you see that one playing out?
I see McGregor doing his regular shit talking. Come on. Whatever. Pussy, all this other shit. Throwing his straight left, trying to knock him out. Throwing those spinning capoeira. You got to say it like that. Capoeira.
I don't have to say it like that.
Yeah, you do, bro. It's America,
capoeira.
Bro. No, man. Hey, man. Come on. Let's embrace other cultures. Let's do this. You have you have the regular dance, and you have that mind game thing playing out, but I don't think it affects Tony whatsoever.
Oh, no.
Tony has more. I believe Tony has more tools.
Oh, he definitely has more tools. The
McGregor
question is,
has one really, really, really good tool.
he does, and he just spent his working on his boxing specifically.
Yeah.
I think for me the question is there's a lot of outcomes because anytime Tony Ferguson fights, there's a lot of outcomes. But two basic outlines come to mind. One, McGregor knocks him out early because Tony Ferguson is hittable. Some of those counters Kevin Lee was hitting him with, especially off the jab, were the same counters that McGregor would hit, and that McGregor did hit versus Diaz.
Yeah.
So I think the first 2 rounds probably go to McGregor pretty cleanly.
Yeah.
Especially based on when you watch Ferguson fight a clean striker, when he fought like Edson Barboza, for instance, he will just keep trying shit until stuff works. He'll cycle through all his options, and it's really fun to see. But he gets hit every single time, and there's room for a clean striker to just clock him over and over. The question is, does McGregor hit that much harder than RDA? Is he going to be able to surprise Tony Ferguson with one of those counters, and is he going to be able to put him out? If he doesn't, that's when it gets really interesting. The other thing, of course, the X factor is Tony Ferguson has said he'll ankle pick McGregor. Is he going to be able to do that? Is he going to go for a takedown? We haven't seen that in a while, but he is a college wrestler.
Ankle pick anybody and like do some weird ass takedowns was Cron Gracie. But I mean maybe, who knows?
He'll roll for an E-bar though.
Oh, dude, yeah. Cron's nonsense. But you think Tony will roll for an E-bar?
I think Tony will definitely roll for an E-bar.
Well, so I think McGregor. The argument is, I always hate doing these like what if scenarios with that, because with McGregor specifically, because we've done this before in so many other fights, saying like, no, McGregor's not there yet. McGregor, dude, he's there. Like he's already
there,
done what he said he was going to do. But specifically, what I'm talking about with the boxing and the durability of Tony Ferguson, we said the same thing about Eddie Alvarez. Eddie Alvarez being one of the toughest guys to fight in MMA.
That's
the
true.
Underground dark horse, the underground champion, the hipster champion, whatever. Hipster MMA fans love this guy. He's running through Bellator, comes back, wins the lightweight championship. Nobody thought he was going to beat RDA, beats him. We're all worried for Conor McGregor because, like, dude, this guy's got wrestling, this guy's got this guy's got that. McGregor beat the shit out of him with his boxing, with his timing.
It's true, man. You can't underestimate McGregor, especially now that he's developed specific camps.
Yeah,
that's a hard one for me to call.
Exactly.
But I would love to see it.
Me too.
I would love to see that fight because down the stretch, I don't know if McGregor will sort out his cardio issues, but that's Tony Ferguson's biggest weapon.
Right.
If he survives early, his cardio is a serious problem for someone like McGregor. Serious problem because he just does not slow down. When he fought RDA for 5 rounds, and RDA, by the way, is a cardio monster himself. They went 5 rounds in Mexico City at altitude, and Tony Ferguson built his own camp at Big Bear. The altitude didn't affect him. They fought at an insane pace.
Yeah.
And he beat up Rafael Dos Anjos over 5 rounds in Mexico City, and they both took a lot of shots. Tony Ferguson wasn't affected at all. So if it goes 5 rounds, oh man, it's hard not to see that one going Tony Ferguson's way.
So that's interesting. You mentioned the elevation thing because Tito Ortiz has his gym up in Colorado for a while, and I believe it was Big Bear.
Active fighter Tito Ortiz.
No, well, when he was fighting, but that was a big thing. That was his.
Oh, to have a gym at altitude. That was groundbreaking back in the day.
Yeah. I mean, he was like, yeah, it helps us. He's like, it takes you a couple days. You'll be sick for like a week, 2 weeks. You'll feel like you have the flu, and you just work through it, and then all of a sudden you get used to it. But
that's probably what McGregor needs to do. If he's going to fix his cardio issues, he's got to make some substantial changes.
He doesn't run.
Does he not run?
He doesn't run.
What does he do? He just cycles.
Yeah, he does. Quoting Nate Diaz, touch butt in the park with that freak with the ponytail.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he does. From what I understand, he doesn't run. Maybe I'm wrong, but I believe just
cycles and swims.
Yeah. Which whatever. I mean, some people. What's his face? The
ATT.
What's the kickboxer?
Man, what's the kickboxer?
He fights for glory. He's a commentator.
The only one I can think of is Joe Schilling.
No. Well, Joe Schilling smokes, and the excuse for not running, I I think everybody's different.
So we're going to talk to Phil Daru, the ATT strength and conditioning coach, in a couple of weeks, and he's actually said that he doesn't think running is the best.
Right.
But then again, whatever McGregor's doing is not working, and Tony Ferguson does his road work in the mountains, and it clearly does work for him. So
I think McGregor's issue isn't necessarily the cardio.
You think it's more mental?
Se. I think it's not even more mental. I think it's pace. I think it's his pace is weird. His pace, he blows his load too early.
I agree. Tony Ferguson talked about this too. Tony Ferguson's like, Kevin Lee's going to have an adrenaline dump, and I've been here so many times, and I'm still going to be there once the adrenaline dump's over.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, and it's probably because he hasn't gone 5 rounds all that often. McGregor, I don't think he knows how to set a pace that he can sustain indefinitely, and Tony Ferguson does. And for some reason, probably because his cardio is just insanely good, Tony Ferguson sets a higher pace that he can keep for longer. So
let's move on. So we get off this fucking Tony Ferguson thing. Let's move on. Let's get to the co-main event, DJ and Ray Borg, and let's talk about whether or not Demetrius Johnson is the greatest of all time or not.
Well, for him to break the record, the Anderson Silva's consecutive title defense record, in the way that he did, suplex to flying armbar,
that was awesome.
Oh my God, that was amazing.
Amazing.
And you know what's crazier? Ray Borg is like, I've never seen that before. I'm pretty sure he just made that up. No, he didn't. He practices on people in the gym all the time. He said that he's hit this hundreds of times in the gym. I don't know if hundreds is an exaggeration, but he's hit this at least dozens of times in the gym. That's something he does. It's just one of those things about Demetrius Johnson. He's just that good, like consistently that good. And I don't know, man. It's you can make it. Let's put it this way. I think you can make a case that Demetrius Johnson is the greatest of all time. I could see you disagreeing, and I don't think he'll ever get that recognition from the wider MMA fan base, and that's mostly because no one cares about him.
Right.
So I don't know, whatever the reason is. I think it's a kind of a more generic personality. And he's actually got a great personality, but in terms of like being a larger than life figure, Demetrius Johnson doesn't get the recognition that Fedor Emelianenko or Anderson Silva or John Jones or George St. Pierre get for whatever reason.
It's the X factor. You don't really know.
It's hard to describe. Yeah. And I'm very interested in figuring out exactly what that is down the line. But I don't think he'll ever be recognized as the GOAT in most people's eyes. He has fans, and what he's doing is spectacular. Here's the big question you always run up against. He's never fought anybody of note, and that's not true. Joseph Benavidez, basically,
twice.
He just fought Joseph Benavidez twice. That's probably his best win in terms of the person's resume.
Yeah, I would say John Dotson though.
John Dotson is also incredibly good. Yeah, let's not forget that. John Dotson twice again.
Twice. Yeah.
John Dotson, there's no corollary to John Dotson like in the people that say John Jones has fought. No one is that dynamic and that powerful. And he beat him twice. And he beat him way worse the second time. Mm-hmm. Same with Joseph Benavidez. Joseph Benavidez has only lost to Dominic Cruz, and that by split decision.
Right.
And at flyweight, he's only lost to Demetrius Johnson.
Yeah, and even making the call of Ian McCall when he fought Ian McCall the first time.
Ian McCall was considered Ian McCall was considered the best flyweight in the world at the time.
Yeah.
And so every time he's fought someone twice, he does better the second time. Mm-hmm. So part of that is due, I think, to Matt Hume.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, man. I think people underestimate how technical and how athletic flyweights are compared to larger weight classes. Those guys are really good. It's just they don't get recognition because...
It's the same thing, yeah, because of their size, right?
Because of their size, and because Demetrius Johnson has been the only champion, and any dominant champion is going to make a division look shallow. Look how fast our opinions of light heavyweight changed once John Jones became champion.
So the lighter guys are always funner to watch. Whether or not there's a knockout, it's still the pace is what's exciting. It keeps it going. I remember my father at a very young age used to talk about the really small guys, the flyweights, the flyweight boxers, and he said, they're not really. It's almost like a sideshow, but you see these guys go in there and they just beating
do
the
crazy shit
out of each other, just so fast, and just these little guys just beating the shit out of. So there is that that factor of the pace being the exciting part. But my thing is with Demetrius Johnson, a once 135-pound contender.
Yeah. He lost to Dominic Cruz at 135.
Yes.
In a pretty good fight. It was just
Pretty good fight.
very clear the size difference there.
Exactly. So my opinion is a fighter is changing consistently throughout their career. Demetrius Johnson has gotten better, substantially better since he's been champion.
He improves consistently, and that's just due to his work rate.
Yes.
His quote-unquote boring personality is probably also the reason for his consistent success. He just does not fuck up, and that's because he's in the gym consistently, and he's been in the gym for years. The other thing to note, when he fought Dominic Cruz the first time, he also worked full-time in a warehouse, man.
Right. That's a good point. That is a very good point. And that can be an argument as well for his GOAT status, GOAT recognition. But my argument is, yes, on paper, he has beaten some great guys. He surpassed Anderson Silva in the title defenses, the greater number of title defenses in the UFC. Sorry, my stomach this club soda's getting me.
I told you should drink water.
Hey, man, I like club soda, bro.
I don't drink water, AJ Herrick.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. But I think that given even though John Jones tested positive, we can get into this whole thing. But there's so many people in the talent pool that are taking stuff. I think John Jones is just that talented, but there's a lot more on the line when you get in the heavier weight classes, and you see somebody that's that dominant, fighting and beating legends that have beaten so many other legends: Quentin Jackson, Rashad Evans, Shogun Hua, Lyoto Machida. He's beaten these dudes that are fucking killers. And I'm not saying Ray Borg and John Dotson, they're not. I'm not saying they're not killers, but in that level of competition, they're literally killers. Like they're big, strong, fast killers.
But again, that's it's the size thing, man.
It is the size thing.
It's going to affect perception.
So, but let me say this: the reason I will say that Demetrius Johnson is probably the most talented fighter in
that.
UFC.
I actually would disagree with.
You don't think he's the most talented?
I don't think.
Who do you think's the most talented?
I think John Jones is probably at this point in time. He's the most talented guy.
So that's fucking hilarious that we have that. So my thing is, I think he's the greatest because of his resume.
I'm just saying the learning curve. It's hard to judge talent, but the learning curve for John Jones is much faster. Demetrius Johnson learns faster than most fighters. Like Matt Brown talked about this. Demetrius Johnson will pick up techniques much faster. But it's also he's a really hard worker and he's in the gym consistently. John Jones is not, man. John Jones goes out and he parties. He's not even in the gym between fight camps very much.
Yeah.
And he will see something once on a video, some ninja move from some kung fu artist. He'll try it once and he'll get it.
So that's a good point. I just think that
his learning curve much faster than Demetrius Johnson. Demetrius Johnson, again, so he worked full-time when he fought Dominic Cruz, but his learning curve is, when you look at the arc of his career, is about average. John Jones was on the phenom track. No, when I say about average, it's above average, obviously, but it's still like a more typical arc for learning than John Jones was. I say John Jones is the most talented.
I still say John Jones is GOAT. I even with everything, man. He, regardless of if he took steroids or not, he still beat DC, man. Like, I mean, it is what it is.
Man, I don't.
It's rough. It's a rough assessment, but I don't think it's the same. I just don't think it's the same. And the reason I don't think it's the same is because of the size difference, and because of the resume. John Jones' resume is a lot different.
It's different, but I think if you look at win for win, I don't think it's overall stronger than Demetrius Johnson's. We can argue that again. And again, it's hard because Demetrius Johnson has fought guys that are bigger than him. If John Jones moves up to heavyweight, if he somehow avoids the suspension, as there's talk that he might.
If he can prove, I'll take a little side road. Jeff Nowitzki said if he can prove that Turinabol was found in a supplement over the counter at GNC, which he has claimed, then he will completely avoid a suspension.
Which is crazy.
It's not as crazy as you think because they did tests of different supplements. Because the supplement, we can get into this, but the supplements are not regulated. I mean, most of them are made in Utah, which is completely devoid of any inspection. You can pretty much go there and start your own business, get distribution there and send it out. And I mean, you and I could start our own supplement company, put whatever the fuck we want into it, claim it's this and that. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah,
and sell it. So people are taking. I mean,
everyone does it. Alex Jones does it.
Yeah, Jesus, dude.
Don't ever buy supplements from Alex Jones. By the way, they're just shittier versions of the stuff you can get.
You remember being in school, man, and like everybody's taking creatine. Bought like EAS muscle tech shit from
oh yeah,
and then all of a sudden we're all like huge bench pressing, squatting and deadlifting like 40, 50, 60 pounds more in like a couple months.
Taking breaks every 15 minutes to go pee.
Yeah,
from the classroom. Yeah,
dude,
I remember that.
We were all dude. I remember taking that shit, but you got to think about that, dude. We don't know what the fuck's in that stuff. I mean, it's a very popular brand, but that could be something with John Jones. But anyways, back to Demetrius Johnson. I think that if Demetrius Johnson moves up, fights Cody, TJ, whoever is the champ next, I think that will give him more of.
You think that would give him?
I think that would give him more of a push. I think people will start favoring him more. I think that would give him more of a push for sure. But on paper, yeah, I mean, he is the greatest. He did what he had to do to beat the title reign, to beat Anderson Silva's title reign, number of defenses. I just don't believe his resume is comparable to my personal opinion, the GOAT John Jones. Or even if John Jones didn't exist in the UFC, Daniel Cormier's resume. I mean, these guys like they're fighting.
Daniel Cormier is probably the one guy that John Jones has a win over that I would say Demetrius or Johnson has no corollary for.
Right.
I mean, it's hard to make the claim that Joseph Benavidez is more dominant than Daniel Cormier is in his respective division.
That's what I'm saying. In his respective division, like they're two different divisions. Like I just don't think it's the same. I don't think
if he beats Henry Cejudo again,
yeah,
then maybe we can talk, because Henry Cejudo is an Olympic gold medalist wrestler. He's gotten better since he fought the first time. So here's the other thing: John Jones fought a lot of these guys way after their prime. Some of them slightly after their prime, some of them way after their prime. Rampage Jackson, I mean, come on, his last days were far behind him. Same with Shogun. Shogun's very inconsistent.
Yeah, but Shogun was a champion when he fought him. Shogun knocked the fuck out of Lyoto Machida at the time.
But Shogun is A, super inconsistent. B, he's terrible against wrestlers. And
he
C,
didn't get wrestled.
and C,
he got knocked the fuck out,
his knees are but his knees are bad. And yeah, I guess I don't want to shit on John Jones's record too much. He did beat former champions, but like, I mean, come on. In retrospect, it's hard to make the claim that those guys were in the prime of their careers. Even Lyoto Machida, after he lost the title, he lost again to Rampage. Only win he had between that and the John Jones fight was Randy Couture. And I mean, he knocked him out spectacularly, but still, I mean, John Jones, I think, beat these guys that were kind of on the tail end of their primes.
Yeah.
Whereas Demetrius Johnson's beating guys just coming up because he's cleaning out the division so fast. Like Kyoji Horiguchi has not lost to anyone besides Demetrius Johnson since his like early career, and he's really talented. He's really good. In fact, his ceiling, there's no telling what his ceiling is, but he was very young when they fought.
So let me ask you this: so I remember. You remember a point in time when Ronda Rousey was considered the greatest fighter of all time, and everybody's talking about her beating the shit out of Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah, that
was
was funny.
Stuff. We look back and we listened to the podcast where people were just talking about how great she was, how she'd beat Cyborg.
And based on what we'd seen, it was
true at the time.
I thought it would. I would have picked her to beat Cyborg back then.
Me too. I would have picked her to beat anybody, But we look back and we just laugh because we're like, geez, like what the fuck? Like
everyone should have known this, and how terrible she was when you just keep her at range.
But people didn't really take striking at the time, dude. Grappling was very, very, very important. TJ, we started seeing guys like TJ and
Dillashaw.
Yeah, TJ Dillashaw. We started seeing guys like him doing that bringing back that sprawl and stand up shit, bringing back the old school, like, fuck it, man, we're gonna throw, and we didn't really consider even Holly because, like, what was the argument? No, her grappling's not as good as Ronda's, but no, you see what happens. So I just.
But Demetrius Johnson is good everywhere.
He's
That's the other
great
thing too.
everywhere.
If you look at his skill set, man, like he's really good at all ranges. He's a phenomenal grappler. His grappling is undoubtedly his best skill set. He's amazing in the clinch. He's really good at range. He's not the most overwhelming striker, but like it's really hard to hit him.
Yeah.
His combination of just speed, ring craft, and overall skill set makes him almost untouchable. So, I mean, you talk about him going up if he goes up and fights Cody Garbrandt or TJ Dillashaw, but those matchups are really tough for him, especially at a higher weight class. Cody Garbrandt hits like a truck, and no one's been able to take him down. No one's been able to come close to take him down because Cody Garbrandt is an athletic freak.
That's very true.
And he hits way harder than Demetrius Johnson. So, I mean, like, it's a fight, and it would be a fight I'd be excited for. But that's a tough matchup. Same with TJ Dillashaw. Frankly, like, he's really tough to take down. He throws a lot of volume on the feet, and especially at 135, that's another tough matchup.
So yeah, that's a good point. Well, I think that's enough for us again with Demetrius Johnson. Let's talk about an upcoming event happening very soon. Cerrone and Darren Till.
Yeah. So who the hell is Darren Till?
I don't know.
So yeah, I didn't either.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'd ever seen him fight before, frankly. I went and watched a couple of his fights, so I can kind of give you an overview.
Okay.
And this is one of those events that I have to recap that the casual fan might want to consider either skipping or just tuning in for the last couple.
Carolina's fighting.
Yeah, your girl Karolina Kowalkiewicz.
She can throw down, dude. She did really good against the champ.
Yeah, she did.
Champion.
Joanna Jacek. She did very well. They're country women. Jody Escabel is really good. She fights out of Jackson Winklejohn. She's really tough, and she fought in Invicta for a long time. That's Karolina Kowalkiewicz's opponent. But just some basics on Darren Till. So this is one of the fights that I think Cerrone should win. Darren Till is a really good. He's a southpaw opponent. He kind of has that. He kind of has a little bit of that karate stance going on. He's from the UK. He's pretty funny. He was on Twitter recently, and him and Mike Perry were going back and forth, and he sent some kiss emojis Mike Perry's way, and Mike Perry was so confused. He's like, why are you sending kiss emojis? And he's like, 'cause I like you.
Oh, that's so funny.
It was so funny, man. And then Mike Perry's like, well, you haven't met me yet. Maybe don't send any more kiss emojis my way. He's like, you'll do nothing, you midget. But so Darren Till is great, and he's got a really good straight left. Doesn't telegraph it much, but his defense is a lot of like lean back. He has pretty good defense, so he has good parries and stuff like that. But he's been leg kicked before. It's one of Cerrone's assets. So people have kicked the shit out of Darren Till's leg over 5 rounds. You've got to think that's gonna weigh in. Also, when you lean back to avoid single strikes, it's pretty effective. But I would with Cerrone, especially recently, throwing in combination, especially on the counter, I could see him catching Darren Till as he leans back from one strike and gets caught with the second or third one. So it's one of those fights that Cerrone should win, but it'll tell us kind of where he is.
Right.
Cerrone's been active for a long time and just has not fallen off. He's been so consistent, and I think that's because he has so much fun that he doesn't get bored. So he keeps developing his skills. He's been training with Brandon Gibson lately, who's one of the up and coming coaches at Jackson Winklejohn. Really good coach, and he does the game planning for Cerrone. So we'll see. I guess that's a little bit of background to Darren Till. He's undefeated, so that's kind of impressive. He fought to a draw a while back, but he's never been beaten. Over 5 rounds, you got to think this is the kind of opponent that Cerrone should win, should beat, especially because he's such a step up in competition. I mean, his last opponent was a guy named Bojan, and I can't pronounce his last name. He drew with Nicholas Dalby. And he usually fights to decisions at the UFC level. So we'll see. But again, there's really not much on this card besides the main and co-main event.
Yeah, obviously I'm going to pull for Cerrone. He's my favorite fighter, hands down.
Really, ever?
Absolutely, yeah. Just he has everything he's his attitude. He's funny. He's just killing life, man. Just killing it.
Yeah, man. Stunt man.
Yeah, I got this thing where I always favor the antithesis of myself. So like one of my favorite authors is Bukowski. You know, I have a lot of similarities with him mentally, but like his debauchery is completely not me. You know what I mean? He was a very interesting. So same thing, cowboy. He's shit I would never do, like jumping out of airplanes and shit.
Wakeboarding,
and like, wakeboarding
with someone on his back holding a beer.
Like it's just
during fight week.
I just respect that kind of fearlessness. It's one of those things. I'm just like, wow, fuck that. I would never do that. But hats off to you. But his jiu-jitsu is amazing. His striking's amazing. You know,
He's one of those guys that's good everywhere. Even his wrestling is good now.
His wrestling's good.
He wrestled Robbie Lawler down.
That's true.
I mean, who does that? Almost no one.
So, do we have anything else we need to go over?
No, let's just kind of tell the people what we've got going on, where to find us.
All right, go ahead.
You know, I'm Andrew Pearson. You can find me on MMA Mania. I write the Midnight Mania series as well as recaps during the weekend and the morning after pieces. You can find me on Twitter at Vorpality. That's VORPALITY. And on Facebook as well. My Facebook page is also Vorpality. Keep an eye out for a project I have coming in January. I'm calling it Switch Kick. It's going to be a smartphone addiction intervention app. It's going to be the first social smartphone addiction intervention app. So I'm putting my degree and my honors thesis research to good use. The research I did was correlating smartphone addiction, satisfaction with life, and flow. Flow theory, we can get into that in future episodes. But basically, it's how engaged you are with life. And what I found in my study was people who are on their phones report that they're not as engaged. They don't feel the same sense of control, and flow is intrinsically rewarding. So people are on their phones a lot, not getting the chance to engage with life. So I'm trying to do something about that. So keep an eye out for the Switch Kick app. You can go to my website, phonepsychology.com, to learn more. That's phonepsychology.com. And tell me what you think. AJ, where can the people find you?
You can find me on Facebook. I'm working on my Facebook page. I have another band page. You can like that if you would like to subscribe to that. But it's no longer active because the band broke up, and I'm actually starting another project with another
Typical musician.
But you can always shoot me a friend request. I love new friends. Shoot me a message. November 4th, I'll be at Bubba's. Well, you'll be hearing more about that. It's downtown Houston. But before that, I will be, October 28th, I'll be at America's Ice House in Texas City. You can come out and support me if you live in this area, or you just want to take a nice little trip. You got some money. Come bullshit with me for a couple hours. Obviously, nobody's going to do that, but, you know, whatever. I'm working on,
He'll be the short, bald guy.
I'll be the short, bald guy.
Probably with glasses.
We'll see what happens. I like to switch it up every now and then, but basically, just look for the guy with the guitar. So
wider than he is tall.
Wider than I am tall. That is correct, dude. You gotta put those push-ups in. Anyways, so if you're in the area, come out to America's Ice House, Texas City. You'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks. October 28th. Be on the lookout for a duo project that we are, my friend Randy Wade and I are putting together. We're not necessarily we haven't come up with a new name yet. We're still arguing about that. So I'll keep you updated.
Typical musician.
Another typical musician thing. I'll keep you updated on that. So thank you guys so much for tuning into the podcast.
This has been The Outsiders.
And, in a couple weeks, we will have Phil Daru on, strength and conditioning coach at ATT.
Yeah, very much looking forward to that. We've got a lot of questions for him.
That'd be cool if we get Antonio Tarver, too.
That's on you, man.
Hey, man.
I got Phil Daru. It's up to you.
All right, shit. All right. Thank you guys so much. This is The Outsiders Podcast. I'm AJ Herrick.
Thank you for watching. Listening. Damn it.
Neither one. Listening, watching. Bye.